Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring a ship that has been requested a fair few times since the last commentary I made was I think like a year ago or something. That's of course the Dmitri Donskoi, the tier 9 Soviet cruiser. I recently unlocked it on my Russian account, so I'll probably be playing this ship a couple of games and featuring a fair amount of commentaries on it. The matchmaking is of course tier 10, which is pretty common when you play tier 9s. You might get lucky sometimes and be top tier, but most of the time you'll probably have tier 10s against you. Now, first thing you might notice is the Yugomo is heading towards C, so I'm probably going to be following him and joining him towards C as well. Now, a few points, of course, before I get into the commentary itself. You might notice some micro stuttering at time, it looks like the game freezes for like half a second and then it continues like normally. Usually it happens when a ship pops up or something. Apparently it's even worse for carriers. I played one carrier game and I had it a lot of the time. This is some sort of bug with the recent patch where they introduced DX11. I talked to Wargaming and Evan, EV1N, aka one of the Wargaming dudes, told me that there's a patch coming tomorrow and the day after. So hopefully those two patches, or one patch, I'm not sure how they're gonna distribute it, but hopefully those patches will fix the problem. I got detected as I moved in, so I popped radar. Now Kaba is showing me broadside, so AP is actually surprisingly strong. You saw that 6k volley with 6 hits. That's of course the strength of using this 180mm AP against the Kaba, because the Kaba has so much broadside armor that you can the AP actually arms. It doesn't just overpen, but it does have time to arm. In fact, with the Hindenburg I quite often shoot AP against Kabas as well. You can get these really surprising 8k plus volleys on Kabas that really catch them off guard because they're expecting HE, but you're in fact shooting AP and it does a ton of damage if they get caught off guard. Now, the Zhao is pushing quite aggressively. I'm undetected, so I'm gonna see if I can surprise him across the island. He does turn in though, so I think this volley is going to go a bit high. Yeah, you saw it went too high, and I'm gonna turn further away. The plan is of course to kite away. That's what you want to do in this ship in general. You want to angle as much as possible and just sail away, because the Donskoi has quite a squishy armor and quite a large citadel. However, the Ognavoy decides to smoke. I think he is smoking up me in fact here. I don't think he was detected himself. So don't, of course, never count on being smoked up by a deity. In fact, I had no idea I was going to get smoked up, especially since I'm playing on the Russian server, where not many people recognize me at all. So I was already turning away and preparing to kite and spam them from range. The smoke of course makes life a lot easier for me, because now I can be closer, which of course means I have better accuracy and I will land more shells, which means more damage and so forth. Note that I'm harassing the Zhao whenever I can. The Zhao is actually my primary target here, because the Zhao can quite easily melt me with his HE. However, at the Donskoi you get these quite powerful guns, and I want to put as much pressure on him as possible to force him to retreat and play as safe as possible, because forcing a Zhao to play extremely passive, extremely far back, and just HE spam from cover is very useful, because he will of course not have the same influence at all. I do shoot 2 volleys on the Bismarck though, and the reason for that is we saw him eat torpedo and we had a fire on him, so we know he damage conned when our fire disappeared. So of course I'm gonna set 2 fires on him after he's used his repair, because why not? That's free permanent damage that he'll be struggling with. The new addition, of course, of seeing the smoke timers is very useful. You can see this smoke is sticking out, so I'm already accelerating as it is running out. I'm still harassing the Zhao though, because as I said, I want to put as much pressure on this Zhao as possible to force him back. It looks like the majority of their team is on this side, so I'm just going to play it as safe as possible. I do pop the radar to see if I can catch any DD that's playing a bit too aggressive. It's quite common when you sit in smokes that someone tries to sneak up on you and torpedo and so forth. You note, by the way, how much damage I'm doing per HE volley, and that is of course because I'm running IFHE. That is of course one of the nice things about the Donskoi. 180mm guns benefit greatly from IFHE. 200 plus guns don't really benefit, but 180mm guns still do. And this is of course a great thing, because it allows you to run the same captain build that you were running on the Budyonny, on the Shores, on the Chapayev. The same thing, you run stealth and you run IFHE and you run demo expert. These are all great. So these are all great builds. So I haven't changed my build at all since basically moving on from the Shores, I think. with Johnny. I've been leveling a new captain, of course, since this is a Russian server, and I haven't had any need to change my captain at all. I'm just playing the same old captain and just, well, making the build better and better as I gain more points. Note that I don't repair one fire, I wait until the second fire, then I repair it. And you can see the constant pressure on the Zhao starting to show. He's getting real low, and he's forced to run away. Even though they have many more ships here, and better ships in general, this constant aggression, this constant harassment of him has forced him to retreat quite far away. The same thing has happened to the Bismarck. My constant harassment of the Bismarck has forced him back as well. Now we have a Baltimore. His radar we have two DDs here, so of course I have to kind of focus him now because, well, his radar can be a big threat. So he becomes my primary target. And at these ranges, well, at these ranges the Donskoi shits on the Baltimore. Like, it's not even close how hard you dominate the Baltimore, because, well, not only does he have extremely lazy arcs, he can barely reach this range where I'm shooting from, and for him to hit me is nigh impossible, because, well, the Baltimore plays very differently than the Donskoi. In fact, I would say the Baltimore is significantly more team-oriented and relies far more on the team because of the shorter range radar, slower arcs, shorter range. It's like much more team-oriented. Whereas the Donskoi, you can kind of do a lot of lone wolf things because you have the great range, you have the great arcs, you have the longer range radar, and all of this, of course, adds up. Now, I do want to note one thing though. My radar only lasts, what, 20 seconds? And that's of course the default radar. Ideally, if you have the radar module that increases your radar duration, you should absolutely slot that, because then you can increase this 20-second radar to what is it, 24 second? No, 28 second actually. It increases it by 40%, doesn't it? So you can have a 28-second radar, which would of course be much stronger. However, a Russian account, I don't have that module, so I'm running the increased defensive AA module instead. But so keep in mind that the radar could be significantly better here. This Montana has used his repair. We saw us get a fire on him, and he repaired it. He's trying to disengage, so I'm gonna see if I could maybe get a fire on him before I switch target again, because on high health targets like tier 10 battleships, a fire deals, of course, well, fires always deal percentage damage, but a full fire deals a nice chunk of damage, so it's worth getting that one fire. I do end up getting two though, which is nice. And now I switch targets. This Bismarck, we already know he's probably used a bunch of heals because of all the pressure we put on him, so we're gonna try to get some more pressure on this dude. He does, however, slip into a smoke, and now I have to be careful about showing broadside, because as I said, Donskoi isn't armored. It's not very well armored at all. It's quite a squishy ship, so we don't really want to be in there tanking too much. The Moskva, you can tank a fair amount with the Moskva, but the Donskoi still feels, it's kind of like a crossbreed between the Chapayev and the Moskva. You have better, heavier shells that makes AP more useful at long ranges, but you still have the squishy armor that most of these Soviet cruisers have. It's not until the Moskva that you kind of get the best of the both worlds, but in return, of course, you lose all your concealment and so forth, so there are downsides as well. Rune is pushing up. The Bismarck is disengaging completely, and the Rune is pushing up, so I'm going to see if I can maybe get some harassment done on him. One fire. He instant damage cons. That's not recommended. In cruiser versus cruiser fights, you don't really want to be instant damage con. The Bismarck has also damage con, so I shoot a volley his way to see if I can maybe get a fire. I might have given too much broadside there though. I end up getting a lot of damage, and I don't start a fire on the Bismarck, so ultimately probably not worth giving that much broadside and losing that much health in the trade. He's still giving full broadside, so I am switching to AP here. He does angle away, which is a shame because you can do a lot of damage with this AP. But even angled as he is, I still chunk him for a 5.3k, which isn't bad at all. He does ground, and AP could probably work here, but he's grounded, he has no repair, and well, at this point I might as well just use HE for the consistent guaranteed damage. Hopefully he'll die. No, he does get one last volley off. And I've eaten a fair amount of health damage at this point. I pop my radar because I'm wondering where the Kagero is. And he does pop up actually right next to me. Now, I assume, looking at the minimap, he's going to be radaring the Missouri. Because the Missouri is, of course, a bigger threat. I only have 12k health. The Missouri is going to be is a much stronger ship than I am. He's probably going to be the priority target, or potentially the North Carolina that's sailing over here that's full health. So I assume he would target select the bigger threats here, but he actually torpedoed me and I caught it too late. I think these storms are very fast and I have no chance of dodging them. So he does kill me, but of course my radar gets him killed. So I kind of expected different target selection from him, and that got me killed. So quite a short game. But then we look at the damage at the end, we note that I actually did 168,000 damage against tier 10 matchmaking, and in what was really quite a short game. In fact, if we look at team score, 2.3k, all these tier 10s, they didn't even have time to sail over from A all the way to C before the game pretty much had already ended. If we look at data report, 1.6 million potential. Even though I had a smoke at one point, all the dodging I did between that time farmed a lot of potential. In fact, you can farm a lot of potential damage in this ship because it's very fast, 36 knots, and it has pretty damn good firing angles as well. So you can just keep kiting and dodging, and you will rack up the potential damage quite easily. The overall damage though, almost a wither, but still a 91k raw HE damage. That is of course the power of the IFHE on these guns. You can do a lot more damage as well if you get the optimal situation, especially AP damage. If you fight a lot of cruisers in the Donskoi, then the AP is very, very scary. You can easily citadel stuff like Mogamis and Ibukis and stuff like that. You can easily citadel them at pretty much max range because this AP is much stronger than the Chapayev's AP. Hopefully I'll be able to show that in later commentaries. Zhao 8, almost 32k health damage from me, which is of course a large chunk, and that's the power of those guns and the pressure you can put on the ships. And overall, looking at finally crits XP, I'm running the Dragon Flag as I'm trying to unlock Superintendent on this captain. I'm missing Superintendent, which of course means one less heal and one less radar. Overall though, I'm really enjoying the Donskoi. The Donskoi is a very strong ship. It's both a long-range damage dealer as well as a great support ship. It has great anti-air, it has a very useful radar, and it has pretty damn good DPM. And this combination means that as a support ship, the Donskoi is still probably one of the best tier 9s, might be even the best tier 9 support ship in the game when it comes to cruisers. I would say Missouri probably beats it because being able to push in with that radar and being able to tank at the same time is pretty damn invaluable. But the Donskoi is certainly no slouch, and I did like it the last time I played it, and returning to it now, I have been enjoying it as well. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, as usual, I will start with the modules. Now, my first module that I went for was actually range, because well, while the hull upgrade is nice, it gives you such a small amount of health. Really, the big thing from going from the A to B hull is that you gain the maneuverability, the better rudder shift. That's really been the big thing. The AA is of course nice, but situational. But rudder shift and health are always useful, but I considered the actual values you gain so small that I prefer to get the big increase in range first. From 16.2 to 17.8, it's a pretty significant upgrade. So I went range first, followed by the B hull, which gives you a health pool and better rudder shift, and finally I just unlocked the C hull recently. You can see how little XP I have. I recently unlocked it. I'm pretty sure I didn't have it in the actual commentary. But it doesn't have much of an impact besides giving you a huge chunk of long-range anti-air, which of course greatly increases your anti-air strength because defensive AA multiplies this aura significantly. So even though it doesn't look like a big increase, 10 plus AA, it actually greatly increases the damage you do with defensive AA active. So I do recommend getting the C hull, absolutely. And you need to unlock it anyway on the way to the Moskva. Consumable wise, premium repair and premium heal. These are the two that you should absolutely be focusing on. But after that go surveillance radar and defensive AA. Now you might notice I have 4 consumables. That's because I just recently unlocked Superintendent as well. In my commentary I only have 3. I haven't really had time to play this with Superintendent, but I will make some additional commentaries as promised. Upgrade wise, priority 1, main armaments mod, followed by AA range. Once again, you're a cruiser, so there's no point going for aiming system. Also, of course, there's the fact that your AA is very strong, so there's no point not to increase it. Faster reload on the guns. I don't think you need the range. I think the 17.8 is more than enough. And the gun reload is pretty slow without running the faster DPM module. So I consider having more DPM to be more valuable. Defensive AA mod increases the time your AA is active. Now this is not optimal. Optimally I would run the radar module, which you can slot on tier 9 and tier 10 ships, increases your radar duration by 40%. That one would be absolutely amazing to have, but sadly I don't have it on my Russian account. On my EU account I run the module on my Moskva, but sadly on my Russian account I don't have it, so instead I run the defensive AA, which isn't bad either, but of course it's not as optimal as running the radar duration increase. Faster rudder shift, and of course stealth, because stealth is the bread and butter of pretty much all cruisers. Captain perks wise, priority number 1 is absolutely priority target, followed by AR. You don't need turret traverse because your turret traverse is already so good, so you want AR, followed by, well, this was the build I used on my shores, Chapayev and so forth. This is the same captain, I haven't respect him, but you kind of don't have to respect him until you get to Moskva. So you go Demolition Expert, followed by Concealment Expert, followed by IFHE. This of course benefits Budyonny shores. Well, it even benefits the Kirov, but I doubt you'll have a 14-point captain by then. But it benefits Budyonny shores, Chapayev, and even the Dmitri Donskoi, because 180mm guns gain a big benefit from IFHE. It's not until you break 200mm that this no longer becomes viable. On the Moskva, for example, IFHE is pretty useless. But on the Donskoi, IFHE is still a very good tool, so I highly recommend just keep it, no need to spec out of it. And the last 3 points I put into Superintendent, which I just got. The last 2 points, I'm not entirely certain. I might get turret traverse or something. I'm not going to reach 19-point captain anyway before I unlock the Moskva. And on the Moskva, of course, I will respec entirely because AFT is much better than IFHE on the Moskva. Flag-wise, pretty standard. You want to be running the heal on the cruiser. Fire prevention or in the Yankee isn't that important since your repair is on such a short cooldown on a cruiser. But the heal is very nice. Faster consumable cooldown is quite nice. AA is pretty useful. The 2 fire flags are great. Other than that, I just run XP flags. If you can afford to spare it, speed flags are of course very good, especially on the Donskoi, which is already quite fast. And slotting this one of course increases your speed from 36 to 37.8, which is a pretty significant increase. Anyway, that was my Dmitri Donskoi updated commentary. I'll probably be featuring the ship a few more times, since once again I haven't really covered the ship in like a year or so. So the last Donskoi commentary was made with the old Captain Perks build, so it's been a while since I really touched the ship, and I have been enjoying it. I think it's a very fun ship, and it's quite a strong ship. And it has more freedom to operate than the Baltimore, for example, because the Baltimore is so squishy. So I will be featuring this ship a few more games, I would assume. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.